So Trevor, we've done a podcast and we had a video opportunity to take some pictures of the things you've been working on. So I thought it would be interesting to hear from you what you've been working on, maybe do a little show and tell.
Yeah.
So have at it.
A great idea, Harold. So probably I should cover some things that were recently published. You and I collaborated on the campaigns of 1777, Strategy and Tactics issue number 316 came out this summer.
I like that number because it's biblical.
It totally is, right? Yeah, John 3:16. And it was interesting because of this snarl that happened on the cover. And I think this has been reported, but let's cover it again. So the game is Campaigns of 1777, but the lead article that I wrote on the topic was Year of Decision 1777. And somehow that stuck. So my apologies.
That's
that was
right.
Not intentional on our part.
There wasn't a behind-the-scenes campaign
No.
with the article name on the cover.
No, but it was serendipitous, and I guess I got on there on the cover. So it was always a bucket list item of me to be in Strategy and Tactics, and maybe I don't need to design a game now for it. I got the lead article.
Well, it was for me too, and then we also had our friend Terry Leeds
do the map. That's
so
right.
All three of us had knocked out a bucket list item.
There it is. So let me just go over the article real quick. So this was a real fun thing to do. This was such a pivotal year in the American Revolutionary War.
Right.
Your game captures it perfectly with the decisions the British leadership had at the time. And so what I wanted to do was, through artwork, through maps, etc., describe the story, the decision process, the whole Lake Champlain area, the whole great options of splitting up the northern colonies from the middle colonies and so forth, and the options there, and the rivalries between the British leadership in Canada, London, and New York City, and the efforts to take the capital in Philadelphia. So fantastic! I think you'll like the article, and for your readers,
Terrific article, absolutely.
And the map that Terry Leeds you hinted at already. Let me throw this out here as well. I'll put it all in there, but it covers the same area of focus. Point-to-point map, beautiful artwork, great displays for the forces, and I just love it. Naval movement and everything factored in. Throw in some of the counters here as well. Let's see, have those upside down. So, S&T 316. If you haven't seen it, take a look. Great game.
Yeah, and Terry Leeds is such a gift on the art that he makes me look like a better designer. No question.
Is this the second time you worked with him?
It is. Yes, and he's going to do South China Sea too.
Oh, he is.
Which will be a different sort of map.
Yeah, very going from 200 years ago to the modern day.
Right.
Yeah, very good. Another item that I did recently, jumping over from Strategy and Tactics to C3I number 32. This one just came out in the summer as well. I've kind of taken on this role of designing what I call counterfactual history articles. And what I mean by that is articles that you tweak a variable in a scenario, thank you, and then play that in a game setting. In this particular case, we're looking at the game Ukraine 43. We're looking at the situation where the Allied invasion of Sicily is delayed a month and a half, and as a result, the Russian counteroffensive after Kursk hits German forces that were not there historically because they haven't been called to Sicily. And so you have a chance to play with mobile German forces on defense that weren't historically there. And it provides an interesting opportunity for kind of a repeat of Monstein's backhand blow, but a year later. So that's in C3I number 32. Other good stuff in that issue, including a couple games. When I led up on the whole idea of counterfactual history, I wrote that up in C3I number 31, and just point this out to readers. In that case, I was looking at Normandy 44 and a possible case where the 12th SS Panzer Division was on the bluffs of Omaha, and how that might affect that scenario.
That would have been bad.
Yes, it would have been bad. And I talked about how there's three different genres of counterfactual history. Actually, speculative fiction is the word to use. There's alternative history, which is kind of like the Guns of the South that Harry Turtledove does, where you have a whole different universe, but in a historical setting. Then there's historical fiction, like Patrick O'Brien does with his Master and Commander series, where you have real players, but alternative fictional characters interacting with them. And then counterfactual history, which is really that came from the What If series of articles that were published about 10 to 15 years ago on the whole idea of just changing one variable and seeing how that would play out. And then we add in tabletop gaming as a way to check in and see if those variables would have been as the author wrote that. And that's the fun part, taking a book and then testing it in the game strategy. Can I mention my first design, which was Labyrinth the Awakening? So you and I went to GMT. It was September of 2014. We rode up in your Tesla. What a fun trip that was.
That was great.
Both of us were newbies
at
that event.
And talked war games every minute of the 6 hours.
And Treg was with us.
Yes.
It was a great trip.
And he politely listened to us talk.
He did. And we met Volko there. He was there along with Gene and a lot of other designers. And I threw the idea out to Volko that the recent Arab Spring that had transpired in 2010, 11, 12 could be played out on Labyrinth. And he hardly knew who I was. You know, it was the first time we were there. But I told him I had an idea, and he just took a chance and said, run with it. You know, send me your ideas. And so I did. You know, wrote up a 2-page prospectus, sent it to him that very same week. Started working on event cards. And then over a 2-year period of time, this, what I thought would be 20 or 30 event cards, became a whole new deck of 120 event cards, became a full-blown expansion to Labyrinth. Labyrinth covered 2001 to 2009. I added 2010, which was really through 2005. And now 2015. Now we're working on Labyrinth 3, which will cover the next 5 years, 2015 through 2020. Wow. So we got those 120 cards made, and of course it's very much a Trump deck. You've got a lot of flavor from our friend in the Oval Office, but it's also the high watermark of ISIS and what they're doing. And you know, there's a lot of challenges related to designing a current events game, and one of them, of course, is, are you going to be accurate? You know, you're looking at things some of the cards I've designed are designed the day the event happens, and so you don't really have the historical context to see how it played out. Nevertheless, in my mind, it allows us to look at something in a different way. These event cards are kind of ripped from the headline, so to speak. They're published within some cases within the year that they occurred, or within just a few years, and they help us to think about the conflict in a different way. Help us to think about what pressures are being faced by either side, by the different nations that are involved. Maybe what solutions are out there that we couldn't think about. Maybe strategies that both sides' adversaries are contemplating, and maybe help bring that out as a way of teaching that game and the subject matter to people. So it's an enjoyable thing for me.
That's great. What fun.
And I wonder if 1,000 years from now, people will pick up the game and wonder what we thought about those conflicts real time.
It's interesting, right? I mean, the Battle of the Bulge was the Battle of the Bulge. We sit back, we look at it in its complete framing. Yeah. And you're doing this incrementally. And in South China Sea, the same thing, right? I mean, to some extent, it's changing.
Yes.
And so will the game rapidly be overtaken by events and maybe not be relevant? Or will it be very interesting to see what happened during that time? It's a good question.
Or will you have event cards 5 years from now, so that, you know, some other variable that comes up to change it dramatically, like we had with the Arab Spring. Another thing I'm working on is what we're calling Sandbox right now. It is a 6-player coin game on the Syrian Civil War. So this is the second version of the playtest map. So by no means is this the final version. But what we have is a map of Iraq, 2 major cities, Basra, Baghdad, and then Syria, major cities of Damascus, Aleppo, and Mosul, and 6 different factions that are fighting primarily in Syria, including the rise of ISIS in the center part. And you'll note Baghdad is a 9-factor city. This is by far the largest population center in this area, but also in the game, if you don't count the big cities that are in the Gandhi series, that's the largest game in any of the largest city in any of the coin games by population. These are 1 million figures for population. And so the interesting thing about this, and let me scroll this over so you can see it, is as a 6-player coin game, how do you do that? And so I toyed around with the idea of the fact that you're going to have 6 factions toying for who goes first, and depending on what action they choose to do that turn, it then sets up their pieces will move up for the next card play. So you have the active card and then the upcoming card, and those cards are not any faction could play them. It's not tied to one, and there's no faction order listed across the top of the card as we see in other games.
So no sequence on the card.
No sequence at all. So it allows for much variety in gameplay. And then you're kind of posturing, if you want to go first or second on the next card, you're going to choose an option that gives you very little options to do things on the current card or operations in that sense. And so it's a fun little thing. We've tested out and still working on the deck for this. But a lot of the research I did on Labyrinth 2 and 3 plays right into this conflict, and so we'll add that in.
Very cool. Tons of interest, tons of discussion. I'm sure that much will be generated. So
Yeah.
looking forward to seeing how this all plays out and to get to play test it here in town.
Yeah, agreed. And we got a real treasure with Jason Carr being the new developer for the Coin series. He's done well on the cards and the map making tools, and just made it real easy for us as designers to just send him ideas. And in this case, I drew this map out on a piece of paper and sent it to him, and boom, there it is.
Right. Well, you can argue that Volko made a bet, but Volko got Carr involved. Volko got you involved. He's, that's part of his genius, I think.
That's a good point.
Pulling it all in.
Letting people run with an idea, find success, and then repeating.
Right,
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for coming by and doing this video summary and doing the podcast. Always great to see you.
You too. Thanks, Earl.
Thanks.